Now we're going to look at a few examples of how to calculate the variance and the standard deviation. When you're calculating the variance, this is the formula you use. S squared variance is equal to the sum of the squared deviations in your data, squared deviations from the mean, divided by one less or one fewer than the number of observations in your data set, and the standard deviation is just the square root of the variance. Okay, we're going to do three examples. We're going to start with this data set, 10, 9, 14, 12, and 10, and we're going to find the variance and the standard deviation for that set of data. Now, the first thing you want to do is make a little table. Okay, put your data in one column. These are the x sub i's, okay, 10, 9, 14, 12, 10. Next to that, in the second column, we'll have the deviations from the mean for each of these values. And then in the third column, you'll have the squared deviations from the mean for each of these values in the data. Okay, now to calculate the deviations from the mean, all you're going to do, the first thing you're going to have to do is find the mean. Okay, so what we'll do is we will sum up these 5 values. Okay, 10 plus 9 is 19, plus 14 is 33, plus 12 is 45, plus 10 is 55. So they add up to 55, and then x bar, our mean, is going to be 55 over 5, which is 11. Okay, now to find the deviations from the mean, we're going to subtract 11 from each of these values. So we'll take 10 minus 11. That gives us negative 1 for that first deviation. 9 minus 11 is negative 2. 14 minus 11 is positive 3. 12 minus 11 is positive 1. And 10 minus 11 is, once again, negative 1. Now, if you wanted to, you could try to average these deviations from the mean, but you're going to have a problem with that. Some of them are negative, some of them are positive, and the positive ones exactly cancel out the negative ones. If you add these together, the sum of these things, these deviations from the mean, is exactly 0. And it always is. Okay, that's the nature of the mean, is that, you know, if some values are above the mean, some other values are going to be below the mean, and they will exactly compensate for each other. Okay, this is why we square these deviations. Okay, some are negative, some are positive. Since they all cancel each other out, they wouldn't be giving you a very good measure of spread in that case if you just tried to average these deviations. So that's why we square them. And when we do that, we take negative 1 and square it. We get positive 1. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. Positive 3 squared is 9. 1 squared is 1. And negative 1 squared is positive 1. All these squared deviations are non-negative, and therefore when we add them up we will get a number that is non-negative. Okay, the sum of these values right here, 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 9 is 14, 15, 16. So that's the sum of those things. And that's what's going to go up here in the top of this formula right here. So s squared is going to be 16, that's the sum of the squared deviations, divided by n, which is 5, minus 1. That's 16 over 4, which is 4. So that's your variance in this case. And then to find the standard deviation, we just take the square root of s squared. That's going to be the square root of 4, which is 2. Okay, so it's a little bit of work calculating this variance and standard deviation by hand. It takes a minute or two, well, maybe several minutes to do. And in some situations, the mean is not going to be a whole number. These won't be whole numbers. You're working with decimals, and things get very messy. So this is something you generally want to avoid. If you want to do this on your calculator, it's very easy to do. Okay, there are a couple ways to do it. One is to go into the stat editor and select the list you want to edit. We've already got some values in here. I'm going to get rid of those. So I'm going to cursor up here and hit clear, make those go away, and then I'll type in my data values, which are 10, 9, 14, 12, and 10. And then I can find the standard deviation from these values by using one variable stats. So I'll quit out of here. I'll go to stat calc 1 variable stats. My data are in list 1, and I press enter, And then you can see again, we've seen the screen similar to this before. Here's your mean x bar. And then here, S of x, that's your standard deviation. That's where you're going to be looking for that standard deviation whenever you calculate it on your calculator. Now, if you want to find the variance from this, the calculator does not give you that directly. You're going to have to square that number, but you square it and you get 4. And there you go. You've got your variance. Okay? So one variable stats, it gives you the measures of center, like the mean and the median. Also gives you the 5-number summary, and it gives you this measure of spread right here. If you want to calculate the range or the IQR, you're going to have to do a little subtraction yourself, but that's not too much work. And if you want to find the variance, you're going to have to square the standard deviation that the calculator gives you. Okay, here's another example. We've got 6 values in our data set. So n in this case is 6. Those values are 2, 11, 9, 13, 5, and 8. Okay, first thing you want to do is find the mean. Okay, so what you're going to do is add these up. Okay, 2 plus 11 is 13, plus 9 is 22, plus 13 is 35, plus 5 is 40, plus 8 is 48. And then to find the mean, x bar is going to be 48 over 6, which is 8. So there's your mean. Now to find the deviations from the mean, you just subtract each of these values, minus 8. So 2 minus 8 is going to give you negative 6 rather. 11 minus 8 gives you positive 3. 9 minus 8 gives you positive 1. 13 minus 8 gives you 5. 5 minus 8 gives you negative 3. And 8 minus 8 is 0. Now again, if you add these up, the sum of those deviations from the mean will be 0. Negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3, plus 1 is negative 2, plus 5 is positive 3, minus 3 is 0. So you wind up with 0. Again, the deviations from the mean always have to add up to 0. Some are negative, some are positive. We square them so that all these squared deviations are non-negative. And negative 6 squared is positive 36. 3 squared is 9. 1 squared is 1. 5 squared is 25. Negative 3 squared is 9. And 0 squared is 0. And then when we add these up, we get 36 plus 9 is 45, plus 1 is 46. That makes 71, plus 9 makes 80. So the sum of the squared deviations is 80. The variance, s squared, is equal to 80 divided by 6 minus 1, which is 80 over 5. And 80 divided by 5 is 16. So that's your variance, and then your standard deviation is square root of s squared. So that's going to be the square root of 16, which is 4. If you want to find those on your calculator, it's easy. We'll go back into the stats editor and we'll erase this list and we'll replace it with these values: 2, 11, 9, 13, 5, and 8. And then we'll use one variable stats on that to figure out what the standard deviation is. You can see it's 4. If you want the variance, to square that and you get 16. There is another way to do this on the calculator, which is a little bit more complicated, but it's worth looking at while we've got the calculators out. Okay, we've got our data in list 1 already, as you can see when you go into stat edit. Okay, we've got the mean according to one variable stats is 8. So what we can do is subtract 8 from all the values in list 1. And the way we do that is we go list 1 minus 8. Just like that, and then we're going to store that in list 2. So you hit the store button and then second 2, and that calculates the deviations from the mean. If you want to square those, well, you just square list 2 like that, and we can store that in list 3. They're the squared deviations, and then if you want the sum of the squared deviations, you can just add them up. The way you can do that is go second stat, and this puts you into the list utilities. Go over to math, and number 5 on the list is sum, and then we're going to go sum of L3, and it'll add up those deviations, those squared deviations. We get 80, and then we're going to divide that 80 by 6 minus 1. So we'll divide by 5, and we got our variance is 16, and then we can take our square root, and there's our standard deviation. So the list utilities on the calculator are very useful when you're working with data, and we're going to have lots of occasions to use those, so that's a little introduction to that sort of thing. Here's a third example you can do on your own. Only has 4 data values, 19, 25, 16, and 24. You can figure out what the mean is, figure out what these deviations from the mean are, square them, add them up, divide by 4 minus 1. You'll have your variance, and then you can take the square root and get your standard deviation. So try that one on your own. And if you want to check your work, always put these in your calculator and find the standard deviation that way using the one variable stats, and then you can square the result to get the variance, and it should match what you get when you do it by hand. So fill that in and finish the job.